Hello everyone, this is Suneve, and I'm coming to you with Chains and Eyeless Jack X-Reader. We're going to be starting off with Chapter 30, The Reader's POV. Grunting softly, I rolled over in bed and opened my eyes, only to freeze as I found myself face to face with a navy blue mask. Immediately, I gave a start and almost yelped, but quickly stopped myself from making a sound. Mentally calming myself, I thought back to what happened last night. There was a storm and a blackout, and I saw Jack having a nightmare, and later he came inside my room with a penlight. Oh, he must have fallen asleep at some point. As far as I could tell, he was still asleep, though I wondered when he'd crawl into bed with me. Maybe it was because of the nightmare? Strangely enough, he was kind of cute when he was peacefully asleep. Fortunately, the bed was a queen size, so we weren't touching, but still. Swallowing, I edged away slightly and got up, taking care to make as little noise as possible. Not an easy feat, given I still had a chain on my ankle and I really needed to talk to him about getting it off. And for now, though, I quietly walked to the dresser to retrieve a book, sitting on the floor against the wall to begin reading. I was about 5 chapters in when I heard Jack grunt and shift, sitting up and yawning. He went to rub his eyes, only to pause as his hands touched his mask. Glancing around, his gaze fell on me, and I assumed he was going through the same mental process I'd been through when I woke up. Shoulders relaxing, he got off the bed and walked over, crouching in front of me so we were at eye level. This time it was my turn to be tense, and he peeled off a glove, pressing a hand to my forehead. My blood ran cold at the unexpected contact, and after a few moments he removed his hand and pulled the glove back on, departing wordlessly. Blinking a couple times, I started to go back to reading when he abruptly returned with the thermometer. "Open," he said, and I sighed as I opened my mouth, and he stuck the thermometer under my tongue. Pulling it out after it beeped, he examined the screen and nodded. Silently, he stuffed it in his pocket, walking out without another word. Weird, did I still have a fever or not? Shrugging it off, I returned to reading. However, I didn't get far before Jack returned once more, walking to the bed. Watching him curiously, I saw him pull out the key and unlock the shackle attached to the bedpost, catching it as it fell with a clatter. Walking over to me, he dropped it in my hands and then wrapped his arms around me, making me yelp. What are you doing?" I asked, struggling as he hoisted me from the ground. "Stop struggling," he ordered plainly, making me stop. "You still have a fever, you're on bed rest, but I figure bed's a bit boring." Carrying me into the hall, the chain dragged behind us, rattling and scraping against the wooden floor. Eventually, Jack stopped in front of the couch and carefully set me down, snatching the shackle in my hands and wrapping it around the couch's leg. With this, I was now chained to the couch instead of the bed. Well, at least I could watch TV, I guess. As I curled into a ball, Jack went back to my room and returned with a blanket, spreading it over me. With me in place, he walked to the kitchenette to start making breakfast. "Pancakes?" he offered. No thanks," I mumbled, not trusting him to make them without burning them. The offer was still pretty nice, though. Sure, I was chained to a freaking couch, but I guess he cared a bit. Looks like being sick isn't all bad, and funnily enough, I didn't really feel sick. I just had a small cramp in my side. Whatever. As I surfed through the channels, Jack set down a frosty bowl of Frosted Flakes in front of me, making me smirk slightly. Someday I should probably tell him that they aren't meant for the fridge. I shifted slightly so I could eat it while Jack just sat in the armchair like usual. For a while, neither of us spoke, the only sound two idiots arguing on TV about their relationship. And finally, he broke the silence by saying, "Your turn." "Huh?" I snapped my head to look at him in surprise, finding him staring at me. Confused, I asked, My turn? For what?" "I told you my past, you tell me yours." This caught me off guard. My past? Was he asking about Buddy, or... Noting the look of confusion on my face, he clarified himself. "There's no way you were related to that man, that your features are too different, and there were no baby photos in your house. The youngest picture I saw was about 5 or 6, and this surprised me. Really? You paid that close attention?" And he just shrugged. "You were out for a while. Besides, you told me you weren't related to Buddy in our little interview when you first woke up." A shudder ran down my spine as I recalled the interrogation that had occurred when I'd first woken up. Not a very pleasant memory. That wasn't an interview, it was a flat-out interrogation. During that conversation, I'd expected him to slice me open and devour my innards in front of me several times, and it was the first time I'd felt true fear, and unfortunately, it wasn't the last. Reminiscing over it for a few moments, I pushed out of my mind and turned my head away, sinking into the couch with my eyes closed. "Yeah, we're not related. My parents didn't really want me, as far as I know. I'm only here because a condom broke and they were too religious to get an abortion, but he was a family friend, and he offered to take me. I avoided saying Buddy's name, not wanting to trigger Jack or anything. Last thing I needed right now was to make him mad. They didn't argue or anything, they just handed over all my papers and everything, no questions asked. I never saw them again. Sounds like crappy parents, Jack commented, his voice soft, and I shrugged. Yeah, well, I don't know if they were or not. I was only 5, and I don't really remember them. I never really missed them either. I was happy with Buddy. He was like an uncle to me. Fond memories stirred inside me as I thought back to my childhood. Hanging Christmas ornaments, going to the zoo. The key word, though, was. Now my memories were filled with doubt and questioning, wondering just how genuine all of them were. I shivered as I remembered his smile and his sweet tone in the video as he tormented Jack, taunting him with the kidneys. Suddenly, I felt a weight on my forehead, making my eyes pop open. Jack was leaning over me, pressing a hand to my head. Immediately, my cheeks flushed, too stunned by the sudden contact to really react. Still warm, he muttered, removing his hand and picking up his glove. As he tugged it on, I glanced at the TV behind him and noticed something that made me give a start. Sitting up. Hey, Ryan, don't sit up, he hissed, planting his hands on my shoulders and gently but firmly pushing me down. I ignored it and tried to sit up again, making him growl, Ryan, you're sick, stay down. Jack, I said, ignoring him as I stared at the television. There's a picture of me on TV. He tensed and slowly turned. And sure enough, there was a new news broadcast showing a picture of me. For a moment, we just stared at it dumbly, and then I scrambled for the remote and unmuted it. No sign of her, the reporter was saying. If you see this girl, please call. I groaned as she rattled off an 800 number, leaning back. Why was I on the news? I mumbled, closing my eyes. Because they found your so-called uncle's corpse. Jack's response caught me by surprise, my eyes popping open and my head snapping to look at him. He was looking at the television, his arms folded. I saw a newspaper article about it a few days ago, and investigators are totally stumped, particularly about the lack of organs. A shudder ran down my spine as he chuckled, knowing full well where the organs went, and I could almost hear the smirk in Jack's voice. However, more importantly than that. So I'm missing, I muttered, feeling dazed. My absence was finally noticed, yet police were looking at me. I felt strange knowing that salvation might soon be at hand, but it was quickly dashed when Jack chuckled again. Not necessarily. Seeing my strange look, he continued. I cleaned up all traces of your presence, so no one knows if you were even living there at the time. Turns out most of the guy's friends don't remember how old you are, even if you exist, and according to the latest newspaper I found, well, they're pretty sure you're dead at this point. Something inside me shattered at this. They thought I was dead? What? I whispered, feeling strangely hollow. How? Leaning over me, he peeled the blanket off and raised the hem of the blanket, making me tense. He lifted it just enough to reveal a scar on my side, smirking at it. A bit of time had passed since I'd gotten it, and it was starting to fade. However, it would never vanish completely. It was a perpetual reminder of Buddy and his cruelness of the day that my old life was stolen from me. This is why, Jack said, tracing it lightly with his fingertip. They found a bit of blood they could identify near his corpse and traced it to the basement. They haven't said so, but I'm pretty sure they think he was holding you prisoner down there and that he killed you. My blood ran cold at this statement. They thought I was the one in the basement? Suddenly I thought of the video and imagined myself in Jack's place, and tears welled in my eyes at the thought, my heart no longer beating. However, they quickly vanished as I felt a sharp pain in my side. Ah! I gasped. Reflexively smacking his hand away, he looked at me in surprise, and I blinked a couple times. Wiping my eyes, I muttered, guess it's still sore. He didn't respond right away, and after a moment he tapped my side again. Flinching, I inhaled sharply as pain radiated from where his fingertip touched, and he quickly removed it. Guess so, he murmured, fixing my shirt and tucking me in. Ruffling my hair, he lightly brushed his hand over my face, making me close my eyes. Get some sleep now. Chapter 31, Reader's POV. What's that one? A dying poison dart frog. And that one? Red-eyed tree frog. Ooh, and what about that one? Wyan, you can read, Buddy laughed, pointing to the sign. Just look it up yourself. Giggling, I skipped to the edge of the path and peered at the sign in front of the glass wall, eyeing the colorful pictures of frogs with awe. Visiting the zoo was always fun, especially for a 7-year-old. However, the rainforest exhibit has always been my favorite part. Humidity hung heavy in the air of the greenhouse-like building. Birdsong echoing around us, all the colorful exotic birds and frogs, the constant symphony of nature. It was exhilarating, the best part. Looking at the sign, I squinted as I read the letters. Poison dart frog. Blue poison dart frog. I turned to Buddy, beaming proudly, and he chuckled as he ruffled my hair. That's right, he said as I giggled, swatting at his hands. Bending down, he spun me around and wrapped his arms around my waist and hoisted me up, holding me up to the glass. Do you see a blue poison dart frog? There, I said proudly, pointing at a frog with shiny blue skin and a blue speckled pattern on its back hanging on a branch, safely behind the glass wall. Very good. See, you don't need old Buddy to tell you what the frogs are. He spun me around as I laughed, quickly setting me down. Grinning, I quickly wrapped my tiny arms around his waist, squeezing him tightly. I love you, Buddy, I said, nuzzling him. I love you too, Jackie. Wait, Jackie? I frowned, looking up at him to see smiling down at me. A shudder ran down my spine as I stared into his chocolate brown eyes, seeing a strange coldness I'd never seen before. His smile was still sweet, yet at the same time sinister and making my blood run cold. Swallowing, I tentatively said, Buddy? Still smiling, he swiped his hand over my face, and when it passed my eyes, I was suddenly in the basement, my arms hanging above my head, and panic flooded me as I flailed my frail teenage arms, trying to get up and run, only for a force to pull on my wrists. Cold, my hands were so cold, and I couldn't open them. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to run, only to freeze as I heard a sob. Slowly turning my head, I saw Jack sitting in front of me, head bowed and shoulders heaving, black ooze dripped from his hollow eye sockets pooling on the ground in front of him. Jack? I whispered, eyes widening. Jack, calm down, you're okay, just don't panic. I tried to reassure him. Even though I wasn't so sure myself, his sobbing didn't echo, instead growing stronger. The blackness sliding down his cheeks gained a red tint, and soon blood was dripping from his face, a single drop landing in the black pool and making its surface ripple and turn crimson. Jackie, Jackie, Jackie. The familiar voice made me freeze, and I slowly turned to see Buddy standing before us. Shadows covered the upper half of his face, a sadistic grin of inhuman proportions visible as he peered down at us. Crouching in front of Jack, he ruffled his hair, and Jack screamed, tugging at the chains in a desperate attempt to escape. Buddy slapped a giant red X over his mouth as he roughly tilted his chin up, and Jack's eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, it felt like I was hovering behind Buddy now. No, that I was him. I could see the look of despair and terror on Jack's face as blood trailed down his cheeks from his empty eye sockets, feeling his body tremble under my hand. A sadistic smirk made its way across my face as I stared at him, smiling ever so sweetly. Don't be sad, Jackie, I said in a husky voice, my chocolate brown eyes twinkling. You're fine. Tears rolled down Jack's cheeks as I leaned into his face, and suddenly I was separate again, watching Buddy smile tauntingly at tearful Jack. One by one, tears rolled down my own cheeks, feeling helpless. Stop, I whispered, unable to look away. Stop it, shut up, don't say that that isn't you, that isn't you. I screeched into Buddy's ear, but he didn't even look at me. Jack did, though, his hollow eyes boring through my soul. The red X vanished from his mouth, his colorless lips parting slightly. Help me, he whispered, and at that point something snapped. I screamed, falling to my knees as Buddy stepped in front of him, blocking my view. Gasping, my eyes popped open, and I found myself staring at a wooden wall, swaddled in a cocoon of blankets. Slowly I started to sit up, only to hear a chain rattle, making me scream in horror and hug myself, making the rattling worse. After a few moments, my heart rate started to return to normal, and I took a few deep breaths before sitting up, lifting the layers of blankets to peer at my leg. A metal shackle was clasped around my ankle over a thick sock, and it took me a few moments to recognize it in my surroundings. Letting the blankets fall, I flopped onto my back and stared at the ceiling, groaning softly as I covered my forehead with my arm. Hot and sweaty. Whether that was the blankets or the fever, I didn't know. Ever since finding my temperature 2 nights ago, Jack had been adamant that I stay in bed or on the couch. He still didn't remove the chain, saying he didn't want me to try to get up. I don't know why he was so worried about that. After all, I didn't really have much energy right now. My nightmare ran through repeat in my head as I traced the patterns in the wooden ceiling. Tears welled in the corner of my vision with each repeat, but I still replayed and paid attention to every detail, trying to inscribe it to my memory. I didn't want to forget, even if it was a nightmare. I felt like I needed to remember it, to remind myself that I wasn't the only victim, and Jack had suffered just as much as me. No, he suffered more. He terrified me, but he still treated me better than Buddy treated him. Closing my eyes, I allowed my mind to wander. Where was Jack anyway? Given my little screech fest, I expected him to burst in the door asking what was wrong. Remembering I had a clock now, I glanced at it and saw it was pretty late. He was probably out hunting. Sighing, I laid my head back down and closed my eyes once more. I hope this fever goes away soon. Jack's POV. Jack sat on the couch, typing away at the laptop. Enough strength had returned for him to finally feel confident in returning to his original scout and strike pattern. And while stalking one potential target, he'd seen the family drive away, clearly packed for a vacation, and as such he decided to take advantage of the empty house to borrow their Wi-Fi network. Finding the password wasn't that hard. It was in a drawer with some remotes, and soon enough he'd managed to get online with Wyann's laptop. Reclining on the couch with the laptop on his stomach, he typed in a list of symptoms she'd been exhibiting over the last few days. Perhaps the internet wasn't the most reliable source, but he couldn't really take her to a doctor. His textbooks could only tell him so much. Besides, he already had suspicions and wanted to see if they would correspond to searches online. Sure enough, a plethora of websites of varying degrees of legitimacy popped up, each one citing his suspicions in the title. He clicked through each link to read them, finding that a majority of her symptoms appeared on multiple websites. A mixture of pride and dread rose in him as he browsed them. Further strengthening his suspicions, he needed a distraction. What should he do, though? Going on his pre-existing knowledge of computers, he decided he'd mess around a bit. Though he had Wyann's laptop for a while now, he hadn't messed around with it too much outside of browsing some of the stuff saved to it. It had been a while since he'd been able to play around with one in depth, and since he had an internet connection at the moment, might as well refresh his memory, right? It was currently midnight, and he knew no one saw him break in, so he felt pretty safe to mess with it here. Opening the files, he began browsing randomly, and as he did, memories began returning. Soon he was doing things automatically, clicking through files before realizing what he was doing. It was as if his body remembered what to do before his mind. And funny, it was easier to remember how to use a computer than how to cook. Was there some sort of conspiracy in his brain in that regard? As he became more familiar with the interface, a memory suddenly surfaced that made him pause. Slowly, he moved the cursor to the corner, opening the logout option. Usually he didn't bother logging out since the computer automatically logged out every time he closed it or it went into sleep. Clicking the button, he instantly felt stupid as the computer began the log-off process. Why did he even do that? There wasn't really any point, and he wasn't planning to leave. His muscle memory just made him do that. But when the user screen showed up, his thoughts stopped. Next to an icon of a photo of YN with her name was another one. No image selected for the profile and a single name in all caps. Buddy. Those are those two chapters. The chapter after this one is chapter 32. Let me know what you guys think, and thank you for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And until next time, bye bye!